I used to have this a lot. Young people come and say, yeah, I'm bored in high school. I'm itching. I want to do more. I want to move faster, kind of ambitious. I think I'm going to just jump into college. And I would say, you're probably going to be bored in college too.
Right.
Welcome back to the OpenEd podcast. Once again, my favorite type of episode, Q&A with Matt Bowman. So I'm going to start before we get to the questions, because I think we had somebody request this. Say, hey, could you share some success stories of older students who have gone through your program or who have just had an open education? We have a couple stories for you of a couple OpenEd grads. So I'll give you first, a student named Aiden Prout completed the entire K through 12 experience through OpenEd. So for those of you who don't know OpenEd, our program is essentially a program where parents and students can custom create their own curriculum and their own schedule, what they want to learn, when they want to learn it, how they want to learn it. So it's maximum flexibility. And Aiden started a garden box business at age 17. This was in 2021, which was trying to create weed-free and water-efficient garden boxes. And he used 3D modeling skills from some OpenEd courses for the development of the product, did a lot of rapid iteration. He had 3 different product versions in the first 4 months based on customer feedback. So living in market and adjusting to the customer, created an affordable outdoor growing solution that uses natural sunlight and no electric pipes. And get this, set a goal to create, to generate 10,000 in revenue in the first year, and did 150,000 in revenue. Beat that goal by orders of magnitude. So the product is on weedfreegarden.com, but I just think it's so cool. Like the idea that, hey, why don't I try this? Maybe I can make it work. Let me do some models. Let me get it in the market. Let me ask customers what they think. Let me get that feedback. You don't need to wait until you've graduated or received some sort of degree or been given some sort of stamp of approval that you are now ready to do business. This is what real businesses are like. They're experimental, they're trial and error, they're messy, but you have to be living in the market and talking to customers and playing around. And when you have an open education, you have the flexibility to do things like this. You don't have to worry about making sure you're filling up all your time, getting your homework done, your classes. If you want to carve out time to work on a business, you can. And I think Aiden's business is amazing testament to that. So I thought that was a great story. Matt, you got another one to share with us?
I do. Yeah, that's a great story for me. And I love hearing that every time. My story I want to share is Olivia George. I actually had multiple opportunities to meet with Olivia. She is a wonderful leader and person in her own right. She started a breeding dog business, and Olivia lives on a farm outside of a small town in southern Utah. So it's not just that she lives in a small town. She lives 10 minutes outside of a small town. And she was on she and her family lived on a farm, and she decided to start Blue Mountain Doodles. I think she was age 12 when she started it. She worked 4 different jobs to save her first $2,000 to get her first breeding dog. I remember her telling me that one of the hard parts was for adults to take her seriously, that she had a real opportunity to provide them dogs that she had raised and carefully groomed and all that stuff. So she built a website, made it really professional. She actually told me that she had a great mentor. So that's a good tip for any youth, is to find an adult mentor in the space you're interested in and ask them as many questions as you can. So she built her first website, and she actually made 30 grand in her first 6 months. I remember her telling me that, and her parents had never seen that type of revenue come from one business ever in their life. And so she, I think she was just amazing. I think she ended up making 75,000 that first year, scaled up to 120,000 the second year. I worked with her to nominate her as an Ernst & Young Entrepreneur, and she won that award. Went to a big gala up in Salt Lake together with her and her parents, and just was amazed at her standing up on the stage and be able to talk about the things she's learned. She got a scholarship from Ernst & Young. continue to build her business and help people around the country, and wanted to help families who wanted a dog but had allergies. And so she was able to find hypoallergenic dogs to place in those homes. She would travel across the United States. I remember when she told me she was looking at passive income investment opportunities, and she was only 16 or 17 at the time when she told me that. And I just loved it. So she credits her parents with loving her enough to fail, knowing that it would be ups and downs in entrepreneurship, and also credits OpenEd for letting her to have this flexible learning plan so that she could spend time during the day on her business and still take care of other academic goals that she had, off at nights or on the weekends or whatever. And so she really was a mix of all things for OpenEd, and just love Olivia's story.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this story and thinking, okay, both of these stories, great. Some kid, goes and is like some super genius, and as a teenager, they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars. That feels unattainable. That seems unrealistic. That's probably not, my kid's not like that. The point is not that, hey, if you don't get this kind of amazing outcome, then like that's a problem. Let's imagine, take Aiden's story. Let's imagine he had spent time modeling, building the model of what this box could be, experimenting with it, showing it to people, making different versions, and then he goes to sell it. And let's say he had sold like a few $100s and it didn't break even. That would not be a failure, right? Like compared to an experience like that, compared to the alternative of kind of your typical, like sitting in 50-minute classes and doing homework and filling your time with that and not having the flexibility. If a kid is interested in something like this and trying a business, if they don't have the flexibility to do it, what they miss out on, that experience, even if it doesn't succeed, is so much more valuable. I mean, Matt, I know you're like me. You have ideas all the time. I have decades worth of folders of business names and URLs. I know you are a sucker for buying new web domains when you think of ideas. Then all the time I've put into all these ideas that never went anywhere, none of that was wasted time. That's the only reason I've been able to have some businesses that did go somewhere. So I want to make sure people don't feel like, I think these success stories are awesome and I always love sharing them, but I want to make sure people don't feel like, well, that's unattainable. Even if that outcome doesn't happen, the freedom to do that kind of thing and experiment is what really, really matters.
I totally agree. And Olivia will be the first person to admit that she struggles with social anxiety, has challenges with her own mental health and mental challenges there that she had to overcome, and figured out how to balance all those. And so it's not just like she had it all easy and was able to succeed. She struggled a lot and had some challenges to overcome. And others, again, it's not about the dollar amount. It's about the exercise, the grit, the start it, try it, pivot, try something different, continuously learn. That's what the examples of the stories are.
Yeah. And if you zoomed out and said, hey, if your kid spent 6 months doing a set of activities, the end result of which was they really had a much clearer idea of what they loved and what they wanted to pursue in life, versus spent 6 months doing sort of the standard school activities where the end result was they have a GPA of something, right? Like, which one is more valuable to you? Most parents would always answer the first. But then if you're like, if that 6 months is starting a business that fails, are you still going to answer the first? I hope so, right? Because that discovery process is so key. So let's use this as a bit of a segue to a somewhat related, since both of these stories were about kind of business, entrepreneurship. One of the questions we got today was, what are good ways to teach financial literacy in homeschooling? I'm curious how other homeschooled families incorporate personal finance and budgeting into their curriculum. With the flexibility of homeschooling, it seems like a perfect opportunity to teach these essential life skills. What approaches have worked for your family? I would love to hear, Matt, how you guys have approached financial literacy.
Yeah. So the short answer is dabble in entrepreneurship. That's going to be probably the first and fastest opportunity for your child to learn some basic financial literacy. Is go out and we raised, some pumpkins in our garden one year and just loaded up a wagon and told the kids, go sell them for whatever you can get. And they just went down the street with a wagon full of pumpkins, and they sold pumpkins. And whether it was $4 or $11 for the big one or whatever, that's the beginning of financial literacy education right there. And so that's just the first thing, is try to go have your child sell something, or even just resell. Have them go find used clothing in your, in old closets, or ask your neighbors that you'll take all their old clothes to Goodwill for them after you try to sell them. And so just try to mark up and resell some old clothing. Any of that opportunity gives kids the opportunity to think about margin or value or just conversation. So definitely start with entrepreneurship. The other one is that, some may or may not like, is our kids would love like SimCity type computer games, Roller Coaster Tycoon, or Stardew Valley, or something where you are in a simulation where you build stuff and you have to manage park revenues or ticket sales or concessions. That's a very great learning opportunity for them to just see a business operating in a very safe, simulated environment. The third idea would just be around, let your children participate in the family monthly budget. Have them grocery shop with you, have them forecast how much they're going to spend in, my wife did this really well. We'd always get to the cashier and she said, okay, how much do you think our bill is? And they would just try to calculate, oh, I don't know how much is in our grocery cart, how much are things? And they'd say, $150. And it was, $500 or whatever. And so with a family of five and 5 kids and us, they would say, oh, wow, that's a lot. How does all that add up? And how many times you have to do that in a month? And just participating in the family budget of some sort really is an opportunity to teach the core financial literacy skills. How about you?
Yeah. 3 things came to mind. So on like just a very basic level, I found when my youngest is playing Little League baseball, I will always have our 2 middle school daughters volunteer to work in the concession stand. And just like something as simple as that, there's not a lot of opportunities when you're young to be able to work these days. Like most companies will not hire someone until they're 16 or older, work a cash register and whatever. So whenever you find those opportunities, taking tickets at the basketball game or anything where you can volunteer and just make change and do basic financial transactions. And it's just interesting how they'll start to think, because I ask my daughters about the concession stand. What do people buy? How much are they charging for them? Then I'll be like, what do you think it costs the baseball diamond to buy those things? Then we'll go to Costco and I'm like, look, if you bought like a bulk thing of, 50 bags of chips, it costs whatever. And if you went and sold them for this much, like start to think through. Anyway, so that can be really fun. So I always feel like
water bottles, right? Like one time there was a parade going or something. We bought a case at Costco of these water bottles and they sold them for $1 each.
Yep.
Right. Which is a very affordable price in the market. And yet the margins were huge.
And what I love about that too, is you not only get sort of the basic financial literacy, you can sort of do basic math on profit and loss and whatnot, but it helps you see the world in terms of opportunity. And you see the arbitrage that like, hey, in a certain place, things are valued more than in another place. And if I can move them from this place to that place, I have created value. I didn't steal from anyone. I didn't exploit anyone. And instead of going through the world with that kind of victimy, like businesses are always trying to rip me off, you're like, wait a minute, people want things and I can help them. And when they pay me $1, they say thank you and they're happy. And it gives you that like positive sum view of the world, which I think that's really the core of entrepreneurship, is like seeing the world as positive sum and opportunity. So that's one, like anywhere where you can get them involved in like, transactions or work experience early and then get the financial component. Another one is, my kids actually love Zillow. And this, of course, didn't exist when we were kids. They love to look at different neighborhoods, different houses, browse them, see how much they are, compare them to how much it says our house is worth. And Zillow, it will show like estimated payment, estimated, monthly interest, principal. And at first they're just curious. They just want to go look at cool mansions in Beverly Hills or whatever. But eventually they develop this understanding of like, oh, that house costs that much. Oh, if you bought that in Michigan, it would be like half that much, right? They start to get these different, and then you can start to have conversations about, hey, this house 3 years ago, you would have paid half that much because the interest rates were lower. Now the interest rates are really high. What do you mean? What are the interest rates? Let's talk about interest rates and mortgages. So that's really fun because kids love to look at cool houses, especially, and like interesting things. Or Airbnb is great as well, looking at the difference in rental prices from different cities and markets. So that's a second one. A third one, I heard this years ago on Econ Talk, which is a podcast I've enjoyed for a long time. And there was a guest on there. I don't remember his name, but he said he set up for his kids Bank of Dad just to help them learn like the trade-offs, savings and spending. And it was basically a spreadsheet, but whenever they would get money, they had the option. They could spend it or they could put it in their Bank of Dad savings account. And he paid them like 5% monthly interest or something like that. That was enough. So if you have $100 in there and you see it turn into 105 the next month, that's enough for a kid. A typical APR in a bank is not going to matter for $10 or $20 they've got in there. So you got to make it a good amount. And he said it was so interesting to watch the way that it transformed their thought process. So when they would go on a trip, instead of just like, will you buy me this? Okay, I'll buy you all a t-shirt. He would give them all, here's your souvenir money. Each of you get $40. And they would sit there thinking, should I use it or should I put it in Bank of Dad? And then it would be worth $42, next month, whatever. And so I set that up for our kids. Now, thank goodness, there are apps that do this automatically. I have one called Go Henry, and I have an account for each of the kids. And I can set whatever save interest rate I want them to be paid, and it's paid out of my account. And so for the younger kids, it's a little higher. And for the older kids, it's not as high. And you can also do tasks and things. So just like basic understanding of saving, spending, interest rates, like deferred satisfaction. And what does that mean? I found just a very basic account where you give them an interest rate that's meaningful to them can be a really cool way to do it.
I love that. Yeah. Oh, there's just so many other ideas that we could workshop for, even just at one point we had everyone pick their favorite company stock, right? And just, see what Google or Facebook or Amazon or Microsoft or Apple did in a quarter. And, if you had imaginary money of $1,000 that you bought the shares with, what would it be worth at the end of the month? Like just that basic thing is really interesting.
Actually, I'll give you one more. You just made me think of it. This is so fun because there's so many of these. The financial literacy one, maybe we should do a whole episode sometime. So I'm a big sports fan. I have all these buddies that are sports fans and play all kinds of fantasy football. And there's a football app called DraftKings where like each week, me and my friends, you each have to pick a team, and then you compete against each other to see whose guys got the most points. But when you're picking, they'll give you like they'll say you have $50,000 to spend of like fake money. And each player has a price based on how well they're expected to perform that week. And I don't know where they're coming up with these prices, but so my 7.5-year-old who loves sports, I'll have him sit there with me to make a lineup. And it's so funny to watch him be like, I don't know. I want CeeDee Lamb, but he costs so much. I could probably get 2 cheaper guys that combined would have the same amount of points. And you'll see him as like a 7-year-old. He's running all this analysis and he's trying to figure out how to maximize his salary cap because he likes sports and he likes watching it. It's relevant to him. It's fun. He's not, if I said, hey, let's do some financial literacy learning today, buddy, he'd be like, what? It's like, hey, let's build a lineup on DraftKings today. And so anyway, anywhere where you can find those contexts, they don't play Monopoly too much these days. Like they did when I was a kid. We actually have that game Monopoly. And I found as an adult, I'm like, this game takes so long. I loved it as a kid.
It's too long. Our kids ended up going the speed version. They had a hack. Speed version Monopoly, and it was way more fun.
Oh, okay. So let me pick next one here. We have like 5 or 6 of them. Let me see if there's one connected to this theme. If not, we'll just jump around. So this is a tough one right here. Is it normal to get hate from family? I've been homeschooling my 3 teenagers since August, and they're thriving with the program. However, my extended family has been extremely critical, making snide comments at gatherings and even trying to interrogate my kids separately about why they're not in public school. How do other homeschool parents handle this kind of family resistance?
That's a tough one. That's real. Absolutely real. Uh, my short answer is be patient. Times are changing a bit, and we've seen some of that animosity go from critique to a little bit of jealousy. Like, I wish I actually could do that for my kids. So there's at some point, some of that culturally is changing, and do the right thing for your children, and just, smile and wave.
Yeah, family a little bit growing up. It was a little passive aggressive. You could tell it was there. It wasn't super overt. But from acquaintances, neighbors, people we met, I experienced quite a lot of this. My mom more than us. And I think one thing I first just know, if you're doing what is right for your kids, you're gonna have to take some arrows, and you're gonna have to just like brace yourself up and know you're gonna walk into an environment at that Thanksgiving dinner where you're gonna have to just calmly, yep, we're just doing what we think is the best for the kids, and let them think what they think. And that's hard. That hurts. There's no way around it. There's a type of sacrifice involved that is sometimes inescapable if you have people in your life like that. But two, I find it's good to remember this is not always the case, but I have often found that people who seem the most antagonistic are actually the ones who have the biggest doubts about their own approach to education. And it's kind of as a defense mechanism. They feel like the fact that you have chosen a different path, they suspect that you are judging them for their path.
Mm.
And I think that's often they'll project that like, oh, you homeschool? Well, the only reason I don't homeschool is because whatever. And it's like, well, I didn't say you were doing anything bad, but they assume that you are thinking they're doing something wrong. And this isn't always the case, but often. So often if you can turn the conversation away from you and what you're doing and talk about them, not in like a, well, what are you doing? What's so great for your kids? Be like, well, what do you love about school? Like, what do you love about the experience your kids are having? That's great. That's awesome. That's great that you love that. My kids don't love that as much, so we go this direction. And try to meet them in a way where you can show I'm not judging you, even though they won't say it. Often people are thinking that. So I found that can often like resolve some of that tension and just kind of remove that. And once they feel confident that you're not judging them for not doing an open education, then often they'll be a little bit more relaxed in the other direction.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The other thing I'll add too is kind of a segue to what we've been talking about with entrepreneurship. Let your children prepare your children with some answers before a Thanksgiving dinner like that, where there might be some criticism, and have them talk about a business that they've started or a big project that they've been working on. Have them just go in prepared, so it's not deer in the headlights on the spot, but you actually prep them with a couple. It's like what we encourage business students to do when they're going to go pitch to an investor or whatever. Have your elevator pitch handy anytime. And what that means is, if you happen to be in the elevator with an investor or potential huge client, you got to be able to say it in 20 seconds or less and sound articulate and smart and passionate. So arm your children with their elevator pitch before Thanksgiving dinner, and it can help them be able to be confident in that pitch of how they answer those types of questions instead of feel like they're on the spot with no preparation.
That's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. Even in smaller ways, I've had this experience before where I just haven't thought like to give my kids some talking points. We were at the opening practice of a new baseball season, and all the kids are sitting around, and the coach is like, okay, everybody tell me your name and what school you go to. And my son, I just saw this look on his eyes. He was like, what am I supposed to say? It's like racing through his head. He like didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
And so I think he ended up saying the name of the co-op that we go to. But I remember thinking, oh, that's like a situation I had sort of forgotten to say, hey, if anybody asks you where you go to school, you can just say this. And to give him something to feel more comfortable and not have that feel like a hostile moment or a tense moment for them.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Here's the next one. How can homeschool kids build long-term friendships? I have two boys, ages 7 and 5, who attend weekly co-ops and recreational sports. While my older son has maintained two close friendships from his previous school, my younger one is struggling to form lasting connections. Despite regular social activities, they're not developing the kind of deep friendships I remember having at their age. How can I help them build more meaningful relationships? So I'll share a couple thoughts on this first. And again, I want to preface this and all of these things with like, I don't pretend to have the answers. Matt and I are sharing from our experiences and what we've seen. So I know there's a lot more out there and probably other families who have even better ideas. The first thought when I read this was, I like, don't stress too much is sort of my first thought. If they're doing weekly co-ops and recreational sports, they're clearly having the opportunities and the context to be around other kids and make those friendships. Don't sweat it too much if you feel like it's not happening or happening fast enough or close enough. For one, 5 is pretty young to have like a bunch of deep friendships. I always try to remember, I compare my own childhood to my kids, and then I'll often check myself and I'll go through and I'll be like, okay, let me be really realistic. And if I really push my memory hard, a lot of times I'm like taking the best highlights and condensing them into some kind of montage where I imagine that I was like so much harder working than my kids. What's wrong with them? Or I was so much more this or whatever. And I realize that's probably not true. Right. So I'm always careful to not try to say, well, I was like this at this age. Why aren't they? And we live in a different era. We live in a different time. I'll tell you, kids today, I'm pretty confident in this. They don't connect and have as much close friendship in general. They have a harder time in general, public school, private school, homeschool, than kids when we were young. And I think a big part of that is just the ubiquity of screens and the ability to connect. So you have the ability to text with your friend from the state you used to live in. That makes it that much less likely you're going to take the time to plug in and meet new friends in this state. Those have pros and cons with them, but those are some realities, things that I've noticed. So kids are a little bit more introverted in my experience, a little bit less likely to jump in and make those connections than maybe when we were younger. Kids at age 5, that's pretty young. If your 7-year-old has friends, like I would kind of, first thing I would say is like, relax a little bit, take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. Then the only other thought is if you notice, depending upon your kid's personality, some of my kids would just immediately meet someone, start playing and say, can we have them over for a play date? Other of my kids would never do that, but I could sort of notice, or not so much me. My wife is really good at this. I think he really likes playing with that kid. I'm going to go talk to the kid's mom and say, hey, would you ever want to do a play date? And if you notice your kid hitting it off with someone and you feel like they need more connection and better, more deep friendships, just look for those opportunities. Hey, did you get along with so-and-so? Would you like it if we had them over sometime? And that can sometimes help your kid if they're a little bit shy, get over that. Matt, I'm curious, 5 kids, were any of your kids shy or did any of them have a harder time than the others making friends or connecting?
Yes. So everything you said is accurate, Isaac, and I would echo everything that you answered. Um, you know, our first 3 were boys and then 2 girls. Our 3 boys had lots of different experiences, good and bad, with building friendships and relationships. And I remember one, it wasn't until he was like 17 that he finally found a close friend. So to your first advice, just take a breath, just give us some time. And my wife and I were thrilled when he finally seemed to make that connection with a close friend at 17. But before then, never really did. And so we were often wondering and worried about that, but you can't force it. You kind of create environments where there's opportunities for them to have people over or engage, but you can't force it. And those types of relationships that are meaningful have to happen organically and naturally. And when it does, it does. And until it does, it's okay. Just kind of keep helping them feel successful in the situations where they are comfortable.
You know, one thing that's always helpful to gain perspective as a parent, if you go and just, if you read a lot of biographies or even just shortened, abbreviated biographies, anybody that you find interesting currently or historically, even just go read their Wikipedia and you start to realize all the different backgrounds. There are kids who grew up constantly traveling all the time and never settled down anywhere, and they have grown up to be very successful adults that you might look up to. There are those who grew up in the same small town all the time, or in the middle of New York City, or like every environment you can imagine. People who have wonderful, successful lives have come from. And so it's like a good reminder that if I have one kid that only has one really good friend or has a couple friends, and I have another kid who has tons of friends, they both can end up having a good life. Humans are radically diverse from each other, radically different, even if we're from the same family. And it doesn't necessarily mean something's going to be wrong with your kid if they're more shy and they keep more to themselves.
100% agree. Every child's different, and that includes their social and friendship needs.
Actually, I'm rereading on the Every Child Different thing, a book. There's like an obscure book I discovered a long, long time ago, written by one of the guys who was a biochemist. He was like one of the pioneers of vitamin theory in like the 40s and 50s. The book is called Free and Unequal. And it's a really interesting, he's coming at it from like a biological perspective of how radically different every human is from every other. And he's writing this in the 50s. It was published in 1953. And he's primarily using these insights from biology to argue against kind of the Soviet planned economy idea that every human is a lump of dough that can just be molded to work whatever job you want them to or plugged in wherever. And he's arguing against what he calls a lump of dough theory. But in there, he's sharing this research, and it's just crazy, shocking stuff. The difference is you can have two people in the same family and two siblings, and one of them, the way that their body metabolizes salt, they need 2 to 3 times as much salt in their diet as the other one. And both of them, one of them having 3 times more salt than the other, are perfectly healthy. And that is what healthy looks like for them. So like something as small as that, something as complex as the human brain and personality, we shouldn't expect everybody to look the same. It's going to look radically different, and that's okay. Let's see.
Here's the plug. Go ahead, Matt. Our book coming out, Isaac, right, is a chapter or more on every child is unique. And we really dive deep into embracing that core principle informs so many decisions if you recognize every child's unique.
Yeah, that really is. I mean, it sounds so trite because if you say that, everyone's a special snowflake. Everyone's like, yeah, we all agree. But it's funny how many things we do that have the implicit assumption that everybody kind of can be molded, however, that they all kind of are roughly the same. And like starting to tease out what would happen if we actually took that phrase seriously, if we actually believed that everybody is really unique. What would an education experience look like if it was customized to each kid? So we definitely get into that big time in the book. Here's from a student. Should I choose a GED or dual credit for early graduation? I'm a sophomore at a small high school where I'm not feeling challenged academically. I'm considering either getting my GED to graduate early or enrolling in dual credit classes at my local college. I'm concerned about how a GED might affect future opportunities, but I'm eager to move forward with my education. Which path would be more beneficial? Do you have thoughts on GED or just jumping right into dual enrollment college?
So short answer is I've been told by lots of organizations that a GED for a 16, 17, 18-year-old is not a great thing on your collective resume. And so that's more intended for the 25, 30, 40-year-old that goes back and decides they want something. The 16, 17, 18-year-old, I wouldn't recommend getting a GED. I would just go create your own diploma path for your high school experience and jump into early college or early industry certification without jumping through the GED hoop.
Yeah, that'd be my recommendation too. I was in a similar spot. As a sophomore, I went to a small private school, and I was like, okay, this isn't really like, I want more. I want to move faster. I did not do a GED. I just went right to community college, just took full load of classes there for 2 years, really enjoyed it, transferred it to a 4-year school. Later ended up feeling like the 4-year school wasn't even that valuable. And I wished I would have jumped right into business, but that's a separate topic. But I don't think there's anything you're going to get from that GED that you can't get better in other ways.
And it may be a negative also.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. To Matt's point, I think from my understanding, a GED is sort of a signal that, hey, when I was in high school, I was going through some hard stuff. I dropped out. I didn't finish. But now that I'm a couple years removed, I'm signaling that I was willing to go back and like get myself back on the right track. But if you're younger, it sort of signals that you're like, whatever, checking out or something. It's just, I've never seen it be a net positive or something that you need. It's not going to open any doors for you, from my understanding. So,
Yeah.
and I especially love in this question, where I'm not feeling challenged academically, and then I'm eager to move forward. When I hear both of those, I get so excited, and I just want to say to the person asking this question, follow that feeling.
Yeah.
Don't stress about the norms and expectations. You're not feeling challenged. You want more. You're eager to move forward, whether it's your education, your career, both. Go ahead and find that path that is at your pace, and don't worry about all the little checkpoints you're supposed to make along the way, or that your peers are making, or your parents want you to make. Like, push to find something that really does challenge you and make you come alive.
And I'd also say, if you're able to have some extra time in your day, start a business.
Yes.
Try something, like get to your 10th business startup before you get to your 11th. Like get to your 10th startup, so you've experienced it, you see what you like, what you don't like. And even if none of those produce profit, or any of those, nail it out of the park, great. The learning you'll get from starting and stopping 10 businesses at 16, 17 years old is absolutely priceless.
It's funny. When I was running the Praxis program, young people would come and say, yeah, I'm bored in high school. I want to, like, I'm itching. I want to do more. I want to move faster, kind of ambitious. So I think I'm going to just like jump into college. And I would say, you're probably going to be bored in college too.
Right.
Like, you may find out that you want to go to college, or you need to for some reason or another, but don't assume. High school just feels a little too tracked, a little too flat, not really exciting, not moving for me. Don't assume that college is going to either. It's sort of a larger version with a little more optionality in many cases. So think about, what do I want? Where am I trying to get? What do I want to learn? What kind of experiences do I want to have? What do I want to discover about myself, about the world? And then list all the ways you could go about trying to get those things in the next 1, 2, 3 years.
Love
List
it.
how much each of them costs, how much each of them, the things you'd have to put up with that you don't like, the things that are fun about them. Throw college in the mix, throw working in the mix, throw an apprenticeship in the mix, throw starting a business, traveling the world, all these different things. And then start to look, like, semester by semester, which one moves me closer to my goal. It may be college, but just don't assume that that's like the magic ticket. So,
Well, that reminds me, I remember after 3 or 4 years of running our program, so this is now 10 years ago, some alumni came back and said, we loved our K-12 experience with your program, Matt. College is awful. It's, it's standardized, it's fixed, it's, no choice. Like it was miserable. It was dry, boring, like all the things that we loved in K-12, we thought would then just continue to unlock in higher ed. And it was the exact opposite. So it's funny that if you experience an open education as a K-12er, sometimes it spoils college, because it's not open education at that level, and it can really discourage and set people, in confusion. So that's where always have in your back pocket, what kind of business do you want to start, what kind of apprenticeship or internship or industry certification or real tactical skills. Those are more aligned with an open education mindset than just sitting in a college lecture hall.
absolutely, absolutely, getting me excited, right in my wheelhouse. Okay, here's the next one. How can I enrich a sixth grader's homeschool curriculum? My daughter, who has been diagnosed with slow cognitive tempo, is doing well with math and writing tutoring, but she completes her current workload in about 2 hours. While she's making progress, I want to ensure she's getting enough enrichment, especially in science and English. What additional programs or activities would you recommend for a student who needs extra processing time? I don't know anything about the specifics of slow cognitive tempo or the needs for extra processing time, so I don't want to pretend to have any kind of expertise on that in particular. But the only thing that I immediately thought when I read this, and again, without context, maybe this is off the mark, but when the question said, See, she's doing well with math and writing tutoring, but she completes her workload in about 2 hours. She's making progress, but I want to ensure she's getting enough enrichment. My first thought was, if she's doing well with tutoring, she's making progress, she's completing her workload in 2 hours, maybe that's okay. Maybe she doesn't need more than that. I don't know. Like, is she asking for more? Is she saying, I want more stuff to do? Sometimes that can be hard as parents to see, especially if you're used to a more school environment. When your kids can get through everything that is supposed to take them a whole day in a couple hours, that can feel really scary. And you can feel like you need to fill it all, but maybe you don't. The answer might be, that's okay. Give her some time to play and explore and do what she wants to. That's an option on the table. I don't know if you had any other thoughts, Matt, specifically on other programs or activities, in this student's case.
Well, I taught sixth grade, so it was interesting to have that example come up and love it. I think that age group is just fascinating and full of energy that sometimes we want to put more boxes around them than not. So first, I'd support what you said of that might just be enough. So don't feel like you have to over program the rest of the day. But some ideas that I would share is, I was a big fan of project-based learning. And so it's the idea that invite her to identify a couple of areas that she's interested in going deeper into something she would like to learn about. And then just let her design a project around that. Whether that's building a PowerPoint slide on dolphins or a little stop motion animation film on, planet Earth or something. Like, just have her choose some topic she might want to dive deeper in and let her define a project. Building a board game was one of my favorite projects that we did. Kids would pick topics and then build a board game, and that would last weeks, if not months sometimes, is to perfect a board game that you have made a prototype of on a topic you're interested in. So much learning happens there, and it's just so much fun to do. How does the gameplay go? How do you win? How do you lose? What are the rules? Write a rule book, design the board. All those things are super fun that I know a lot of sixth graders really enjoyed, and I know adults love that too. So like almost any age can build a board game on a topic that they're interested in. And that might be something that she would like to do, but really just give her an invitation if she wants to figure out what she wants to learn deeper on and build something around that.
How patient you are, Matt. It all makes sense when I remember that you taught sixth grade. That is, I was at a thing at our church for the middle school, and there was like 300 middle schoolers there. And I'm telling you, 300 middle schoolers might be the most powerful little collection of energy in an auditorium you can imagine.
So true. So true.
Okay. We have one final question, and this is, this is a variation on a question that I think we've had in the other episodes, and we'll probably keep having, because this is, in many ways, this is the parenting and education question of our current era, if you ask me, at least from what I've seen myself and other parents. How do you handle device-obsessed kids who resist schoolwork? My 6 and 8-year-old children constantly fight against doing their lessons, preferring to spend time on their devices. Despite setting boundaries and giving them plenty of freedom in their learning, they seem uninterested in developing other hobbies or engaging with educational activities. Is this a common challenge in homeschooling, and how can I help them develop more diverse interests? So, to that last part, yes, this is a common challenge in homeschooling. I think it's just a common challenge in general, even kids when they get home from school. What is the proper relationship between a child and a screen or a device? It's funny. There's kind of like two radically different poles of types of answers that can be useful and relevant. And I'm going to kind of frame them up, and I'm going to let Matt take one, because I think that's where he will want to go anyway. And I'll take the other. So there's hey, try a radical detox. Let's like remove the screen sort of approach. And then there's let's not see the devices as the enemy. Can we work with their interest in these devices? Can we work with the fact that they want to be playing on here? Is there something we can do in that more positive direction to make sure that it's useful and productive. Would you want to jump on and give your take? I'm guessing it's going to be more of the like, hey, how about we don't make the device the enemy and figure out how to use it? Maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but
No, I mean, it's kind of a combination of both. There's sometimes that needs a detox, that you just the brain can get into habitual mode and it needs a little bit of a pause and take a week off or whatever, and see what discovers around. As long as there's other opportunities in the home, Legos or building blocks or paper mache or art, or outside you're building something in the empty lot, right? So a detox requires to backfill with something. It's not just take something away. But then when it's re-entered, figure out a way to have the tool not be the enemy, and just say, hey, what is interesting about your Minecraft game or whatever? And what can we expand inside of that experience to gain some learning from it, and really try to figure out that balance? Where would you go?
Yeah, that's kind of exactly so when you get to a point, because sometimes you can get stuck in all of these preferred theories and ideas, like, okay, I really want to have the type of education where I don't make all these really rigid rules and where the kids are free to explore, because theoretically I believe in all that. But I see what my kids are doing now, something is not right about it. And it's okay to trust your instinct and say, okay, we got to do a reset here. Just like with your health, right? Sometimes you need to just do like a fast and like reset your whole system and just like detox from everything before you start again. So we have found sometimes that if we see that's happening and it's like kids are just getting sucked in, they're getting zombie eyes, they're snippy about everything, they're losing motivation, they're not playing with Legos like they used to. There's this thing with devices that, to the extent that they are empowering us to be creators and to be curious, they have really great power. When they start to suck you into just being a consumer or a critic, and just sort of entering that passive mode, they can be dangerous if you're not ready for it. So we have done like, okay, we're going to do like no screens for a week or whatever amount of time. Or we've done things like screenless Tuesday. The whole house is screenless all day Tuesday. And it's interesting. You'll sometimes see it might take a little time, and then all of a sudden they like really get bored. They're bugging you. What do I do? What do I do? And you're like, I don't know, figure it out. And eventually they like remember how to entertain themselves again. And they go wander outside and start digging a hole or building something with sticks, or go find their Legos again, or find a coloring book, or if you have siblings, they all start playing together all of a sudden, which they hadn't done in a long time. We have seen this happen if we've gotten too much device time. And then I think trying to figure out how to reintroduce it, for me, a few things have been useful. Like, okay, yes, you can start having access to the device and you can play Minecraft or whatever for a certain amount of time, but you're not, this sounds weird, but I'm telling you, there's a qualitative difference. You're not allowed to watch videos of other people playing Minecraft for a while. You got to play and build stuff. And then maybe once you're kind of like back in your mode of you're being creative again, if you're going to look for like a specific piece of advice or a specific inspiration for something, that's okay. But what sort of happens is, I've noticed with my kids, they'll slowly go from playing Minecraft or Roblox or whatever to watching videos of other play for inspiration, to just watching videos of other people play, to just having no motivation. And they just watch videos of other people reacting to other people's reactions to other. It's like this crazy abstraction that we live in because everyone has, the ability to make videos. And I'm like, you're so far removed from tangibly engaging with the thing now. This is becoming a problem. So I think sometimes getting that clean break is good. And then just sort of trying to put those parameters, or saying things like, I remember saying this to one of my younger kids who was interested in, like, he wanted to make YouTube videos or do like cultural commentary on movies or a podcast. And he would listen to other people that he was inspired by. And finally I said, until you've created one, you can't consume one. So create an episode. Doesn't have to be good. You don't have to like it. Then you can go consume an episode. And I want you to get that in your brain, because it also can, if you consume too much, it can also stifle. You start to feel like whatever you make is not going to be good enough because you're comparing it against Mr. Beast or whatever. And so you sort of like, it dampens that enthusiasm. And so I try to like create first, then consume later. and reflect on your creation or look at other people's creations. So those have been some things that have been helpful for us, but I know it's not easy, and there is not a single solution because every kid's different and every personality is different. Some of my kids, you say, get off the screen and they just put it down and they're fine. The other ones, it's like, you got to pry it out of their fingers because they're like totally locked in, you know?
No, I really like the create versus consume. That's a core principle that we're designed as humans to be creators, and sometimes devices can move us into just consumers. So I really like that distinction. One other thing I'll say is that I've seen this with our own children, and we have 4 grandkids now. It seems like in society today, sometimes just having some physical time together where you just hold them and hug them and let them feel a human connection can sometimes break that screen time knee-jerk necessity, and just read a book on their lap or just hold them and talk to them. Like, sometimes that alone can just break the little cycle of addiction to the screen. They just want a hug, or they just want to be able to have human embrace again.
Man, that is a great point. I know for boys, especially when they get to a certain age, they want to wrestle all the time. They want to do something physical. They want to punch and kick and do all this stuff. And I've caught myself sometimes, if my son's like, Dad, let's wrestle or let's whatever, and I'm really tired, it's been a long day, and I'm like, I just want to sit down and read or whatever. I'm tempted to just say, nah, and not like you have to say yes every time your kid wants to do something, but sometimes that moment where like, oh, well, the reason he's on screens is because I told him that I didn't have the ability to go wrestle
Engage.
around in the yard. Yeah, exactly. And if I did, he wouldn't have even thought about the screen because he would have been so happy, just wrestling around or whatever. So yeah, that's a great point, Matt. I think there is a lot you can do that's like, put aside what to do about the screen specifically, and then just think about what are some positive things, regardless of what happens with the screens, that I can try to do more of. And that physical time together and physical contact, that's actually a really great point that gets underappreciated. Brings them back to the real world. Well, hey, this was a really fun episode. Thank you so much for the questions, everybody. I'm really excited to let people know Matt and I are working on a book right now. And
Right
we're
on.
very close to getting it down to the final edits, but hoping for early 2025 to have Open Education, the book, released. As always, if you're not subscribed to the OpenEd Daily, go to opened.co. You can subscribe. And if you want to message us anything, questions for the show or stories, you can email market@opened.co. You can also find us on Facebook and X as well.